do you ever feel like on social media, it's made everyone feel like they need to have an opinion on everything?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it makes everyone feel the need to be outraged at something or pick a side or just kind of like chime in to any topic and without even giving it the necessary thought to have an informed opinion. Like it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to be like I don't know enough to have an opinion. Because I think what we're getting is one of the major problems with social media is it puts us in a feedback loop where we're only reinforced with the same ideology that we already have. So like you could look at any issue from multiple sides, but you're only going to be fed in based on the algorithm, kind of a one-sided perspective that reinforces your already, existing beliefs. And it's only going to reinforce your biases. And this is obviously a problem, and I think that it's really important for people to expose themselves. Like the algorithm's not going to help us. I think it's really important to go out of our way to expose ourselves to opinions that we're not familiar with and perspectives that we're not familiar with. And social media is great for enabling that, but I think you've got to make an effort to do it yourself, because the way the app is structured, you're kind of going to get your own biases reinforced, and that is somewhat to blame for the division that's currently in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Because people only consume one side of any particular story, and then they think anyone who doesn't believe that is an idiot because they haven't been spoon fed the same exact headlines. So no one's on the same page, and I think that as humans, we need to take some personal responsibility to inform ourselves and educate ourselves, and not just blindly absorb whatever social media throws in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the tricky part is we're like, well, I don't want content that triggers me. So I'm going to follow accounts that I agree with. And then those accounts that you agree with, it ends up having that group think of like, okay, we all agree on, drinking green smoothies in the morning. So the next thing we all agree on is to do acupuncture. And then the next thing we agree on is to do this and that. And then it like turns into, well, here are just like a political party is. It's like, if you agree with this one thing, then you must agree with all of these other things. Otherwise, you're the other side, and the other side is the bad. Welcome, James, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Yo, what's up? So happy to be here and chat with you. Thanks for having me on.
And the first question I'd love to ask you is what makes you your highest self?
Mm, the highest self for me is it's kind of less about what I'm doing, and it's more about just the state of mind I'm in. Like the simplest way I would put it, and I was just writing about this, but when I'm aligned with my intuition rather than my ego, because I think that the ego is what keeps us grounded, right? And that's not to say there's anything wrong with the ego, but it's what it's kind of like if you're going fishing, the ego is like fishing in a shallow pond, right? You're only going to kind of be on the surface level. But when you can cut through the clutter of your ego and access your intuition, I feel like that is connection with the higher self. So I think there's people that use all kinds of definitions for, you say higher self. Some people say, you know, you could say God, you could say, you could just say intuition. And I think that's when you cut through the clutter of your conscious mind, cut through the clutter of your ego, and access that vast space. It's kind of like fishing in a deep ocean where you have access to essentially endless ideas and inspiration because you're connecting with source. And I think intuition is that it's kind of the umbilical cord that keeps us connected to source our entire lives. So I think that's kind of the gateway to accessing our higher selves is living in that state of inspiration and intuition.
I 100% agree. And it's so funny because last night I had a dream, and it's like so perfect that I'm talking to you today because you'll understand this. People listening to this will understand this. So I had this dream that I was like, we need to create some sort of platform to connect people to their intuition. And then like another aspect of me was like, well, we already have Instagram. And it was like, no, Instagram is there to actually disconnect us from our intuition. Like the download was like, it's in a way, it's disconnecting us because instead of like those moments that we get the hits, we're logging onto this platform that, you know, puts other people's, maybe it's their hits or their fears or their thoughts. And then the last part of my dream, I looked out the window of my actual bedroom and there was this like dolphin that was like coming out of this purple and pink and these psychedelic waters. And it was like, there's a whole other world that we don't see because we're not connected to our intuition. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts because I know we've had conversations on like the beauty and the gift of social media and how we actually can share spiritual knowledge and inspiration. You yourself are a meme artist. And the way that we're using this as a crutch that like our moments of boredom where that download could have come through were kind of like plugged in that, you know, you wait for your elevator, you look for your phone, you're doing this, you look for your phone. What is that balance and how do you see it?
Yeah, social media, wow, it's really a double-edged sword. Personally, I love Instagram and I'm not ashamed to say it. That's not to say I love the company behind Instagram. You know, Facebook, now known as Meta, the new, you know, the mega brand behind the Instagram app. You know, we could talk about, you know, that as a company and what the leadership and what they're doing to society and what with our data. That's one conversation, and we need to acknowledge that it's not all good. But in terms of Instagram as a user experience and as a product that not only connects people, but enables and encourages people to share, I'm a fan of that personally. And for me, it's not without its downsides because it does suck our attention. It does take up a lot of time. I mean, I would be, there's a reason I don't check like time spent on my phone because I would probably be honestly a little embarrassed by how much time I am spending on my phone. At the same time, I think it's all about, it's just like life itself, right? We curate whatever experience of reality that we choose to by the people we spend our time with, you know, the types of work we spend our time doing, you know, the media that we consume, you know, the kind of conversations that we're having. Are they toxic conversations or are they uplifting conversations? You know, we kind of curate our experience of reality, and I think that social media is a microcosm of that. You know, we curate our relationship to social media. So I think it's really important to be very conscious of how we're spending our time online. You know, I really don't follow accounts that are going to trigger me or upset me or, you know, make me feel bad in any way. I kind of use it as an art platform and as a friendship platform and as an inspiration platform. So you're right, like you might just be standing in line and you pull out your phone. And but for me, when I pull out my phone and I look at Twitter or Instagram, I might come across an image that suddenly inspires a meme. And I might make a meme while I'm sitting there, while I'm standing in line. Or I might even like have a little bit of an idea and I'll just take out my notes app and I'll write a little bit like a poem or a tweet that I can share later. So for me, like when I was a kid, I used to always carry a notebook in my pocket so I could write down little poems, you know, when I had time. So for me, it's just a tool, and it's really my art studio and my art broadcast channel. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, but it's really what we bring to it. that really is what we get back from it. So I try to really be careful and curate my feed and use it as a tool of expression and inspiration rather than getting sucked into the rabbit hole of some news story that is going to make me feel really depressed after I read it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if it wasn't for social media, specifically Instagram. And a lot of people wouldn't be listening to this. We probably wouldn't even have these careers, because it allowed us to reach people without needing the middleman of a publicist or a major media company or someone choosing us, right? And I think that's the gift of like, you can literally choose yourself and just be a content creator today, or an author or a podcast host. Like there's no doors that you need to blast through. And like that double-edged sword, I find myself like the times that I'm about to maybe make a creative leap. Let's say I'm writing and I'm like, oh, like I'm stuck on the words. That's when I'll go on Instagram. And it's like almost like my ego's way of protecting myself and keeping me confined of like, I can't stand this state of maybe uncertainty or growth that I'm in right now. So let me go get some hits, some really nice hits, some cool collages and some great quotes. And I guess in a perfect world, we would use it in a way that like we're coming into it with intentionality, just like we showed up at this podcast and we're coming in, we're doing this podcast, we're having this conversation. But it's just sort of like the way that the app is designed that I feel like that's what makes us always feel like, well, I'm going to be behind. I'm not going to know what James ate for breakfast today. I'm not going to know what people are thinking about this conversation or this topic. And I think for me, I don't follow any accounts that bring me down, but I'll find myself like, I think through stories, like ending up in this conversation that I really have nothing to do with, and then trying to figure out the conversation. And do you ever feel like on social media, it's made everyone feel like they need to have an opinion on everything?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it makes everyone feel the need to be outraged at something or pick a side or just kind of like chime in to any topic, and without even giving it the necessary thought to have an informed opinion. Like it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to be like I don't know enough to have an opinion. Because I think what we're getting is one of the major problems with social media is it puts us in a feedback loop where we're only reinforced with the same ideology that we already have. So like you could look at any issue from multiple sides, but you're only going to be fed in based on the algorithm, kind of a one-sided perspective that reinforces your already, existing beliefs. And it's only going to reinforce your biases. And this is obviously a problem, and I think that it's really important for people to expose themselves. Like the algorithm's not going to help us. I think it's really important to go out of our way to expose ourselves to opinions that we're not familiar with and perspectives that we're not familiar with. And social media is great for enabling that, but I think you've got to make an effort to do it yourself, because the way the app is structured, you're kind of going to get your own biases reinforced, and that is somewhat to blame for the division that's currently in our society. Because people only consume one side of any particular story, and then they think anyone who doesn't believe that is an idiot because they haven't been spoon-fed the same exact headlines. So no one's on the same page, and I think that as humans, we need to take some personal responsibility to inform ourselves and educate ourselves, and not just blindly absorb whatever social media throws in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the tricky part is we're like, well, I don't want content that triggers me. So I'm going to follow accounts that I agree with. And then those accounts that you agree with, it ends up having that group think of like, okay, we all agree on, drinking green smoothies in the morning. So the next thing we all agree on is to do acupuncture. And then the next thing we agree on is to do this and that. And then it like turns into, well, here are just like a political party is. It's like, if you agree with this one thing, then you must agree with all of these other things. Otherwise, you're the other side. And the other side is a bad guy. And you actually wrote this poem that's on page 15 of your new book, How to Laugh with Amusement. And it starts with, Our prayers were passive aggressive comments tossed carelessly into the internet cosmos. Can you read this poem for us?
Absolutely. Yeah, this one's a doozy. It's called "We Are the Universe Learning to Love Itself."
Mm.
And what this was, I loved thinking about poetry as a point in time that reflects the times where it came from. So I was trying to think how people in the future might look back at us today, because we always think like, oh, we have this generation has it all figured out. Our science is the best, our philosophy is the best, we know where it's at. But you look back throughout history and things are always changing, new discoveries are always coming, and then everything just becomes, outdated, and you can really see through the cracks of the society's beliefs in the past. So I tried to write a poem that looked at our society today almost from the future to better understand from a higher perspective the times we're living in.
So good.
So I'll read this now. We are the universe learning to love itself, like a shelter animal learning to trust again. If you're reading this in the future, I can't imagine how we in our now must look to you in yours. Don't blame me. Everyone else was doing it, so I did too. We looked outward at a society built atop sacred soil and searched for resources to suck and bleed dry. We measured our worth by the power we yielded over others at the expense of any semblance of control over ourselves. We worshiped at the cold feet of golden corporate cows while an anointed infant Messiah floated away down the river unnoticed. We watched as every pure and honest human creation was stolen and used against us by the contagious alien forces of ego and greed. Our sacred ceremonies were cigarette circles outside bars, 4 whiskeys deep. Our love was the secrets we kept hidden while sharing our fears with anyone who would listen. We exchanged our indigenous wisdom for junk food and paper money, printed in bulk by the Federal Reserve and loaned at interest to the US government, who sucked blood from its own children to pay the debt. The words of our prophets were mistaken for dogma, and the soft radiance of the female spirit was mistaken for something to conquer and own. Our hunger was a bottomless hole we tried to fill with everything we didn't need. Our prayers were passive aggressive comments tossed carelessly into the internet cosmos. Our meditation was impatiently refreshing social media apps, waiting for someone, anyone, to reach through the screen and touch us. We debated the moral superiority of right and left hand puppets, moved by the same masked madman, while Moloch sat atop his plastic pyramid and laughed in black magic ritual between ceremonial sips of semen and blood. Our sex was a rushed and impersonal reenactment of bad porn because we didn't trust each other enough to open our hearts. We spoke in argumentative absolutes because we had forgotten the subtle languages of poetry and myth. Our best liars were given gold watches and government positions, while our truth tellers mysteriously hung themselves in Paris hotels. We ate genetically modified cheeseburgers in front of flat screen TVs while Fox News barked propaganda between commercials. Energy leaked from our souls like a broken faucet, feeding vampires and parasites instead of our higher purpose. Our salvation was a paycheck and 6 hours of dreamless sleep. But on our best days, we were also golden, like a brilliant child who didn't yet realize how beautiful and powerful she could be. and you could almost see our light shining through our shadows.
Wow, full body chills just hearing you read it, because I mean, I can speak for myself. I think every single person can so deeply resonate with that. And there's just almost like such a sadness in being seen. Like there's such a sadness in like, yeah, I do sometimes just refresh my apps waiting for someone to touch me. Like what you said, that we keep our love to ourselves, but we'll share our fears with anyone who'll listen. And just like how often we bought, like, I think the conversation the past 2 years has been like, so the quarantine, here it's going to get worse. Here it's, you know, and like that's what we, because we actually feel safer to trauma bond than we do to actually share our love. So, you know, with all of that being said, where do you see humanity going now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think it's important to recognize the darkness as much as the light. You know, I think that we live in a world of duality. You know, and it's, for me, it's about integrating that duality as opposed to, you know, ignoring the shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the role of poetry and art, is to expose that shadow side and to love it, you know, and to shed light on it. So I think that, you know, in terms of where society is going, you know, there are a lot of utopians out there, and there's a lot of dystopians. There are a lot of people that think that we're going into a great grand awakening, and that all the darkness will be extinguished from the earth. There are other people that think that we're going into a dystopia, you know, a technological dictatorship of some sort. And I don't know where we're going, but I suspect it's going to be a mix of those two. I think that, you know, one of my greatest literary influences was Walt Whitman, the great American poet. And in his writing, he would talk about how there's never been as much heaven or hell as there is right now, meaning that heaven and hell are just states of mind that exist here on earth, and they're always here. And it's the point of the human experience is to balance the light and the dark, and to basically choose our own adventure on that path. Like, I often like to think of the human experience like a video game, where we are on an adventure, and maybe it's to help accelerate our soul's growth. Maybe it's, you know, to eventually reach enlightenment. Maybe it's just because our souls have all of eternity to play with. So we're just going to kind of drop into this 3D human experience for a while, just the same way that you and I might watch a movie to suspend our, you know, real selves for 2 hours to get lost in this fantasy world. I think it's possible that we're just here to suspend our soul's experience of eternity to watch this human experience for a lifetime, right? So I think that the challenges and the darkness are built into the game. They're kind of built into this experience. So I don't think, if you're playing a video game, there's going to be bad guys. You don't need to be afraid of them. You don't need to give them your fear. You just need to learn how to navigate the game. And the bad guys and the darkness are there to help us learn how to navigate. So I think that we're moving into an accelerated future that's going to be a lot more, you know, digital than it is now. And there's going to be elements of virtual reality built into the world that we're moving into. And I think that a lot of the current power structures are going to collapse. I think we're seeing the economic system, the political system. We're seeing the last gasps of late stage capitalism kind of playing out in front of us. And I think that there's going to be some major shifts that are going to take place in the next 5 years. We've already seen them begin. And I think the future is going to be very different. I think it's going to be beautiful in a lot of ways. And I think there's still going to be challenges. I think there's still going to be quote unquote darkness to deal with, because that's the human condition. But having said that, ultimately, I'm very optimistic about the future. And I think that we are going to be moving towards some more sustainable systems, because we've kind of worn out the old systems. Like, they were good for a while, and now they're in need of some major changes. And I think we're going to see a lot of those major changes in our lifetime, and be part of defining what it means to live in the world that we're going to be building from here.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that it's so much easier for us to think in this really dualistic lens of like, okay, the future is we're going off grid. We're just going to build these communities and grow all our own food. And like, it's going to be amazing. It's Atlantis, it's Lemuria, it's the new rendition. Like, it's going to be lit. And then the other of like, because if we don't do that, we're going to be tracked and on a social currency score and this and that. And who knows, like maybe I think there's going to be the option for people to choose either of those sides, but I think the vast majority of us, just like we are today, are going to be living somewhere in the middle. There just aren't that many people screaming about that on the top of their lungs as there are the people who are in either direction. And I know we've had a conversation on technology versus nature and the integration of that and what that could look like. And you shared a bit about Terence McKenna and his last interview and what he foresaw. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So one of my biggest influences from like a spiritual and intellectual standpoint is Terence McKenna. And the best way I would describe Terence McKenna is as a psychedelic philosopher. He was in the 70s. He was really one of the first Americans to go to South America and live amongst shaman and to study psilocybin and ayahuasca. And he was just an incredibly brilliant person and had a way of articulating things that was really just incredible. But he, so I'm a technology optimist. I think that technology is will be used in service to humanity. And I also think, like you said, going off grid and living sustainable lives is very important. I think returning to local supply chains and local systems and local government is a very good idea. So I'm interested in what does the best of both worlds look like? And Terence McKenna was the same. He was very much a fan of technology, but also part of, he was as much of a granola hippie as you can possibly be, right? So how can these two worlds work together? And once Terence took, I think he took like a crazy amount of psilocybin, like 10 grams or something like that. He was Terence McKenna is the origin of the term heroic dose, which means like a 5+ gram dosage of psilocybin. And he encouraged people to take heroic doses because that's really when you're going to break through and start having visionary experiences. So on one of his many heroic doses, Terence was shown a vision of the future. And this was, hundreds, if not thousands of years in the future. And what he saw was a group of humans living in the jungle, completely in touch with nature. They were naked. They were eating off the trees. There was no footprint of civilization that could be seen. So it was like a natural paradise. But these same people, whenever they close their eyes, behind their eyelid, they would access a virtual world that was more, amazing than you can imagine, where they could interact in virtual reality and exchange, you know, things and words and comments and hang out and do business in this virtual world while they still remained, you know, completely in touch with nature. So I think that's a extreme example, but I think that type of future is possible because what what McKenna said about that was, you know, living in the virtual world to some degree takes a lot of the pressure off of our footprint on Earth. You know, if we can have some kind of a virtual reality, it means we don't need to use as much gasoline here on Earth to travel or to build cities that destroy the natural habitats. So it actually, the virtual world has a potential to help restore Earth to a natural state because we can take some of the pressure off of the Earth. So I love the vision of us being more connected to nature and at the same time more connected to technology. And what does that look like? I think it's too early to say. But I think a future like that, because when you think of something like that, it doesn't create a divisive position of, oh, do I want to be on the side of technology or do I want to be on the side of nature? I think these things can work together to create a future that is better for all of humanity.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that optimistic perspective because, a lot of the circles that I run in, the technology path is it's more about the downsides of it, right? So many people have this view of, especially when you're more in the spiritual world, earth-based, et cetera, we do tend to focus on the downfalls of technology. And I mean, we wouldn't be here. You're in Austin and I'm in Miami, and we're like literally talking through this like crystal device and recording, and people are listening to this like all through technology. So sometimes we do forget and we do take, I mean, we wouldn't be who we are right now with these thoughts and perspectives and potentially even consciousness, or this type of consciousness, if it wasn't for technology. And I guess like what I wonder with this, like today, Facebook announced they're changing to Meta, and different companies are building these metaverses, which to my understanding are essentially like cities in VR that you can go visit your Gucci store and buy your virtual Gucci shoes. And you could go visit the cinema and watch the movie there and have just an entire like shop and have outfits and do everything in this virtual world. And potentially eventually people are going to be investing more time in who they are in this virtual city than they are in their real life, but in a way that's kind of already happening with social media.
Well, especially with kids and video games. Like that's even crazier. Like that's one thing that I don't do is play video games, but people get lost in the world of virtual reality in video games where they collect tokens, or like you said, virtual Gucci shoes. They'll spend like having the right digital items that they can purchase in a video game is more important to some kids than it is anything that might have in their real lives. So kids are really like, I almost want to start playing video games. I'm not going to, but I almost want to, just to kind of get a feel for what it's like to, have an avatar that you care about and dedicate to as much as your physical avatar. That's pretty crazy, but a lot of kids are already doing that with video games.
Right. I mean, NFTs are that. It's like people spend millions of dollars on a piece of art that everyone can see because it's online, but them just owning the code, like it's so far out there and so ungrounded that like our conscious minds can't understand it. So for me, I try to remain open and look at the positives, but it feels to me that I mean, in a way, this is already happening. Like these kids are, paying so much attention to their video game, but then you see other girls who Photoshop all of their photos and videos that they look like an entirely different person on social media. And I'm like, wait, isn't the point of like looking good on social media so they want to meet up with you and you build an in-person connection, but they actually have no intention to ever meet any of these people in real life. So all that matters to them is how they essentially are creating avatars of themselves. The only difference is it's based off of their actual photo at one point in time, and then you have people who catfish who it's not even based off of their photos. So I'm just like curious what's going to happen to like the human body when we are so disconnected that it's almost like it doesn't even matter what I look like, what I feel like, what my home is like, because I'm in the matrix all the time. And that's what matters.
Yeah. And being authentic in real life is always the most rewarding, like having authentic connections. And there's always been people that pretend to be someone they're not. And you can kind of see through it. And then they make connections that are surface deep, So I think the same thing applies to social media. Like the more that you're just authentic and yourself and real, people can see that. I've had, social media relationships that were very deep and rewarding because they were true and honest and from the heart. And then you meet those people in real life and then they become your real friends, So it's still at the end of the day, and it's so important just to, even if you have you know uh, an avatar or whatever you're doing to your you know your profile picture, or you have a cartoon or whatever it is, just being honest and being true to yourself from the heart, and finding people that you vibe with on a deeper level, that's always going to go deeper. Than you can't catfish true friendships, and that's going to be the true, no matter you know universe, metaverse, any verse that we can imagine.
Mm. Yeah, it's so important. I hope, the younger kids who are completely born into this, they have that awakening and that recognition within themselves because we grew up not having the internet and we're the only generation like ever that got to experience our childhood of not having the internet and then later on getting it. And I remember like making my MySpace and then my Facebook and like creating, but really like we went into it with the purpose of, oh, this is a thing for me to like actually connect with like real life friends, whereas a lot of these kids are coming into it as, I see mom and dad and they're just in their room working all the time. They're not seeing anyone. So like maybe like this lifetime I'm just going to be in this room and it's like who I am online that really matters, and investing all of their time and attention into basically building the Sims character of who they are. So I'll be curious to see. I also have faith that like a lot of the rainbow children are being born right now and they do have these higher levels of consciousness, and that maybe they can use all of these technological advancements to their power and to see the different holes in it. So I'm curious, like, what is your take on in this more digital world, its effect on intuition? Because something that I find often is that kind of coming back to the group think you made this post that there's so many different modalities and languages that we're approached with. So I'd love for you to share this poem that you recently wrote, because right now I'm seeing on social media people are like, it's Jesus, it's Christ, like Christ is the way, and then like other people are like it's shadow work and it's goddesses and it's this and it's that, and it's almost confusing people to like what is the truth. So can you share a little bit about this poem that you wrote?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of I think that there's been a big awakening in the spiritual world in recent years, and people are waking up in one way or another to some kind of a higher spiritual truth, which is great. But at the same time, I've seen so many people get attached to their version of truth. You know what I mean? And I grew up in a more or less a strict Christian home, and so I kind of saw that side of things where you believe like, okay, Christianity is the true way. But then you're exposed to Buddhism and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let me explore that. Oh, this has a different set of beliefs, but it kind of all comes back to compassion the same way that Christianity does. So I'm a big fan of staying open-minded. Another thing I wrote recently was, don't tell me how spiritual you are, show me how open-minded you are. Because dogma is just not the way. I think that everything comes back to mythology. We're all creating our own mythologies. There's different mythologies to follow. I think it's a trap to start taking mythologies too literally. I think it's once you claim to know some kind of a literal truth, I think you're in trouble, because then you can't see the other, anyone else's perspective. So yeah, so I wrote this. The line that came into my mind is, it's all intuition. And it goes, some people pray to Jesus. Some people are guided by ancestors. Some people talk to aliens. Everyone has a different mythology from which they derive truth. None are totally wrong and none are totally right. They're all metaphors for the same unexplainable thing. Words fail to accurately describe the nature of reality. Don't fight over who has the best story. Hold space for them all. It's all intuition. Trust yours.
So good. And I resonate with that so much. And I think it's this deep human longing to like have our system and like have our community. And like, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Jew, I'm a alien galactic federation channel, I'm a ancestral lineage healer, I'm a Kalima Shakti, whatever. Like even if we're kind of creating these new things, but they are essentially ideologies and essentially stories, right? And I think that they serve us when you've grown up in one, to like, for example, yourself growing up Christian. I know your first book, which I loved, was really more about your journey into Buddhism. So it was helpful for you to have almost like a pathway of these different beliefs that are already like set up and formulated, that you're like, wow, I actually do resonate with this. But then I think the next level of one's journey is to also then not take that as like the Bible, right? And then to continue on and eventually getting to a point that you're like, yes to all of it. And exactly as you said, none are totally right either.
Yeah, I think it's important to be humble and recognize that, okay, we're human beings, right? We're the smartest animal that we know of. I'm sure that there are other beings out there in the universe in some other dimension that are incredibly more intelligent than we are, but we tend to think, oh, we're humans, we know it all. And we think, to me, it's there's so much pride in assuming that you've cracked the code of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, this is what happened. This happened, and then it was this, and then it was this.
I read in a book. How could that book be wrong?
I read it in a book that was written thousands of years ago, and it was translated multiple times with the meaning changing every single time. Like, words are fallible. Language is open to infinite interpretation. And that's why I say everything is true, nothing is literal, because in a metaphorical sense, there's truth to every perspective on Earth. Everyone on Earth is right from the perspective that they're looking from. But that doesn't mean that their version of truth represents some kind of literal, factual, um, universal truth. So I think it's really important for humans to be humble and recognize, like, I'm using the best tools that I have to make sense of the world, and they're going to be limited. Like, our eyesight can only see a tiny fraction of the, you know, the light spectrum. You know, our ears can only tune in to a tiny fraction of the sonic, spectrum. And our minds are the same way. We can only figure out so much. So it's really important to be intellectually humble and say, this framework works for me and I like this and this helps me navigate. And I'm going to use this as best I can to navigate my way through the world. But if something else comes along that challenges my ideology and helps me expand, it's okay to shift your perspective and open yourself up to a new one, right? So I love the idea of just everyone in the whole world sitting around a campfire, and everyone just goes around and says, what's your story of reality? What's your creation myth? What do you give us your story? Give us your version. And just hearing everyone's interpretation of what this life is. I think they're all stories, they're all myths, and we don't have the intellectual capacity to really understand our purpose here. We can only use, and that's why I love poetry, right? Because poetry is metaphorical language. And I think we live in a metaphorical world more than we know we do. So just having some humility, staying open-minded, and having compassion for other people's perspectives, so much more useful than getting caught in a certain dogmatic, framework, which might work for you, but that's not the only belief system that exists in the world.
I love that vision of everyone sitting around the campfire, and it's just like, so why do you think we're here? And it's like, well, I think we're here because of this guy named Siddhartha. Why do you think we're here? Oh, I think we're here because they're Ramayana. Why do you think it's just like, cool. Like, maybe all of those things happen, maybe none of them, who knows, and that's what I love about having this podcast and having so many different spiritual conversations. It's just because, like, how can you believe there's only one truth or only one way when there's all of these different people who, based off of their lives experiences, have come to different points of realization? And I think, different people have different, if you want to call it, soul contracts, which is more in the new age terminology, but like, maybe they are more likely in a certain lifetime to adhere more to certain spiritual principles. Maybe this lifetime for them is about sexual healing and Tantra is the thing for them, or this lifetime for them is about dropping all material desires and it's more of that deep Buddhist path. And throughout our lives, we shift, and like, something serves us for a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade, and then we move on. And it's so important to know that these are all systems and tools to serve us. But once it gets to a point that it's holding us back, and it's like, oh, I'm not able to, for example, a friend of mine, they are very into Buddhism, but according to their vows, they're not allowed to actually learn about other spiritual practices or partake in them. Like, that's part of their Buddhist vows. But it's like, again, I understand, like, their perception is, we want to have purity of the lineage, and we don't want the lineage to be distorted by other points of view, which, again, I understand that. And it's almost like then that limits your curiosity and your growth, and even creates a fear, because, like, the only reason why someone would say that is because they're afraid of, you might find something else that you find true.
Yeah, and I respect, if I respect lineages, and I respect traditions, and even though I don't identify with the Christian faith anymore, I'm very grateful that I grew up with that, because it gave me a strong foundation. I always felt like I had a relationship with God from an early age. So even though my definition of God has changed since then, it did help me give me that foundation. So I do think there's value in like preserving the, the Buddhist lineage, right? As long as you're not condemning people who don't follow it, as long as if that's what works for you, and you believe in this practice enough that you want to keep it alive and maintain its integrity, I think that's great, as long as you don't think that anyone else is wrong for not following the same thing that you chose to. It's kind of like you mentioned soul contracts. It reminds me of it's like choosing a college major, right? Like each soul came to earth, and it's like, or before we came to earth, it's like, what do you want to major in? And it's like, oh, you know what, I could really use some, some mindfulness. I could really use some patience. I could really use some, maybe I want to go and major in learning to be a warrior and learning how to fight for what I believe in, right? Like maybe we all just chose majors before we came, and we're here learning the major we chose. That doesn't mean, if I major in literature and you major in mathematics, that doesn't mean that mathematics don't exist. It just means it's your field of study and not mine. So it's like, yeah, we're all on our path. We're all fulfilling our soul contracts. We just, we have to respect and honor that other people have other majors, and there's a lot of different courses you could take on Earth School, and we need them all.
I love that so much. And it's exactly right. And I think, yeah, what's challenging is when someone is so convinced that like their major is the way. They're like, mathematics is the thing. Everyone needs to know math. Math helps you with this. It helps you with that. So if I see you don't know math, I'm like, do you not know about math? And again, it's coming from a place of like passion, but then it also, I mean, that's what basically has happened throughout the history of time, the forced conversions of like, oh no, but I'm really helping you because I know the right way and you don't know what you don't know. And I see this happening in its own like micro ways in our society. And then there's also a positivity in that, because I feel like our generation, we are like jumping between so many different spiritual perspectives because we're exposed to them in social media. Whereas like back in the day, you were born in a village, like whatever your religion was in that village, that's probably all you'd ever be exposed to. Whereas for us, we're like, just like so many of us have become politically homeless, it's almost like we're spiritually homeless, yet everywhere at the same time, that we're just picking and choosing. Ooh, I like this concept from here, and I like that concept from there, and I like this. And we're creating our own beautiful quilts of all of it. And on the long term of that happening, that actually creates world peace, because most wars are fought over religion. So if we can all see the beauty and truth of all religions, we will have a peaceful planet.
Yeah, it reminds me of like musical genres. Like at one time there was just, there was country music, there was blues music, and like there was classical music. And then rock and roll kind of blended blues and country. And then someone integrates jazz into that. And then at some point hip hop comes along. And then you've got people that are blending hip hop and rock and roll and electronic music all together. And I love that. I think it gives us a bigger playground to play in, right? It gives us different reference points and tools and techniques to utilize. And I think that a lot of if you don't have discipline, or it can be easy to kind of get lost when there's so many options. And just because, like, let's not forget that there was a big phase in the 90s of like rap metal that was awful, right? So like mixing genres is not always lead to like great outcomes. Like you can get into some trouble if you don't have like a strong foundation. So I think it's a balance of, being grounded and having that strong foundation and being centered within yourself before you go around and start trying to mix and match like, religious and spiritual techniques, because it could be really easy to get ungrounded and get lost and start, trying to channel aliens without having a true sense of grounded balance within yourselves. So it really is a balance, and I think just it all comes back to, your own presence and being grounded. I think that's like that's square one. But once you have that, then you can start kind of playing around with, all the amazing ideas that the spiritual world has to offer.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because there is also the importance. And I feel like what's also missing in our generation is to really dive into, well, why are things the way that they are? Like it's going to be, for example, for me with Ayurveda, I went to Ayurveda school for 2 years in India, like learned about it, the ins and outs, the way that it was without any form of change, to then be so thoroughly immersed in this science that I could see, okay, now here's where I feel we could add in more modern nutritional science, etc. But if I just like read some Instagram posts on Ayurveda, I'm like, you know what, bitch, I'm doing my own thing. Like I wouldn't understand the intricacies of why things are the way that they are. And I feel like so often we think that, reading an infographic on something is akin to like reading a book on it. So we may be like, oh, like you can channel your ancestors at any time. Love that. Let me do that. And then like you didn't open up the right container for it. Or like there's certain reasons why there are rituals and processes there. They've done thousands of years of research really to why, such as in the plant medicine world. I can't be like, you know what, I'm going to do my own kind of ayahuasca. It's going to be like a drop-in party. People can come in and out. Like that's what I'm vibing with. It's like, no, that's why it's not served in that way. So I feel like there's that need to understand why these sciences and disciplines have developed in their way, and then from that place of grounding, then also have the courage to look at how they can be adapted for our modern times.
100%. Yeah, I meditate every morning, right? And you know, I think it's good to go deep into something that's sturdy, right? Because I talked about how everything's a mythology. And I think that's true, but some mythologies, because they've been around for so long, they're just more durable. They're more steady. It's harder to get lost in them. So things like Ayurveda or just meditation, whatever it is, I do think it's important to familiarize yourself and go deep with a mythology that is durable and steady, just to give you some balance and to ground you, instead of running off to do ayahuasca the first chance you get.
Mm-hmm.
That should come a little bit later, because you're right, there's a reason people have been meditating for thousands of years. It
Mm-hmm.
works. It's been tried and tested many times. So yeah, it's just having strong roots. I wrote something else recently. If I could read this really quick. um about, we often want to reach for the sky, but in order to do so, we need to have our feet, very grounded. um so this is an Instagram post I wrote. It says, the highest calling requires the deepest grounding. The tallest trees have the strongest roots. Your dreams don't start in the sky, they start in the deep, dark soil. So we want to expand, we want to reach for the, have our head in the clouds, because that's kind of where it's fun, right? But unless you have a really solid foundation, you're going to get lost up there. I did combo for the first time this week, and I'll tell you that was not a fun experience. I've done psilocybin and ayahuasca, where I would consider a fun experience, because you get all these insights and you get downloads and you get, you access just like a higher, your higher self essentially, and you can see things from a big perspective, and it's kind of beautiful. Combo wasn't like that. It was rough. It was not fun. But it was about cleansing and purging and purifying the body. And I'm still integrating that experience. But something like that, it humbles you and it grounds you. And I think it's really important, if you want to eventually expand higher, you need to ground lower first. And it's as above, so below. It's really about that balance in all things through life.
I don't know who said this, if it was you or maybe Emma Zek, but someone wrote, a lot of people want to reach ascension, but they haven't mastered grounding. And it
I
was
love
just
that. That's exactly
so
it.
accurate, because I feel like, ascension, such a buzzword right now, even this is called Highest Self Podcast. We want to expand, we want to ascend. Some people want to astral project, they want to go reach their alien starseed family. And like, that's beautiful. And there may be some childhood traumas there. There may be some, forms of attachment. There may be some issues in your nervous system. Like, I feel like so often we maybe even bypass those very like human and like mental health things that, no matter who you are, we are all going to have some of them, as long as we're in a human body, because it's like easier and more fun and more free, in quotes, to like be like, you know what, the reason why I'm crazy is because I'm actually a Syrian. I'm not even from here, and like that's the reason why. And I think there's that beauty of like having a connection to something that's beyond this world, and to have that, again, that balance and that awareness that like also some things may just be related to your mental health or the way that you were brought up, or like the fact that we're kind of in this 2-year long pandemic, like that also is going to play a role in how you feel.
Yeah, I've spent years now, and I'm still on this journey of moving from the head to the heart, or even the head to the body, right? Like, being in the body. It's so easy for me just to be like in my head and just like imagining and like daydreaming. And, that's just kind of who I am, and get lost in the world of ideas and imagination. But year by year, I'm getting better at like living in the body. And instead of writing all day, taking time to dance and to move my body, and to, to have cacao instead of coffee. So I'm putting myself in my body rather than in my head. And that's a discipline, but it just, when you do that, your ideas will come from a place of just like a deeper truth. Because like the body's wisdom is actually greater than the mind's wisdom. And, calming your nervous system, and because I think that intuition ultimately is a bodily sense. It's kind of like, like you're picking up something in your auric field, which you have to do through the body, not through the mind. So just connecting with the body, and that's what combo did very, very much so, was just put you in touch with your body and all the different components that are, both in the physical sense and in the auric sense, that are part of our physical system. And yeah, that's just it's a good compass when you can feel whether or not something feels true in the body or not. That's a really strong compass. That's something that the mind can't always provide.
Yeah, I so resonate with you that I can also be very easily in the mind and like thinking of these different scenarios. And also I love that. Like I love having these philosophical conversations where like, what is happening? And I love that. And for me, that's why embodiment is where it's at. Dancing, just having non-linear movement where I'm just moving my body. And, I was in this practice of like journaling 3 pages every single morning. And I'm like, honestly, I actually feel better if I don't necessarily do that practice first thing and I just move my body, because most of the things that I was worried about just naturally go away without me needing to like process it and where does it come from, and then I like need to do something about it. So I feel like because we are just so much in our heads in this society, like most of the times we're not even in human connection, we're having Zoom conversations, etc. It's very ungrounding, it's very vata, it's very air, that we need to make the practice to actually be in the body. Whereas back in the day, I mean, even several hundred years ago, you were working on a field, in a farm, in a factory. You were in your body all the time. You didn't get a chance to have conversations like this. So it's important to make the practice the quality that you're lacking in your life.
Totally. And I would recommend to any writer or creative, because I get up and I write every morning. And more recently, I'll get up and dance first, or do some stretching first. And it really, there's something about, I think ideas are a form of energy. And when we get that energy moving, then our mind can pick up on that energy and start to actually download into information. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I also love just like going on walks too, because it's just the body in motion. It's just sometimes we get like stuck on an idea or like loop with an idea, but then once you get the body in motion, the ideas can flow, and then you can open up space for those like higher ideas to come through that almost don't have the space to when you're just stuck in just the thoughts and the stresses and the response and the ping pong game that we're playing with the world. So, yes to all that. And there is another poem I would love for you to share. So, this is the poem, I Want to Believe It, Universe, When You Say You Have My Back. I loved this one
Yes.
so much.
So this is it's called Trust Issues with the Universe.
This is so funny.
And that's exactly what it is. So here we go. I want to believe it, universe, when you say you have my back. I want to jump off the cliff of my comfort zone and know that you will catch me. I want to laugh on life's rocky roller coaster and wink at the sky in a cute gesture of mutual understanding, instead of hugging my worries like an abusive teddy bear afraid to let go. I'd love to dance with you under moonlight on the eve of the apocalypse. We could make such a marvelous team. And yet, I'm skeptical. After all, and please excuse me for asking, why exactly should I trust you? What have you done to earn my confidence? I look out my window and see a world insane and millions of people in pain. Charlatans take what the honest earn while the highest intentions crash and burn. Mothers struggle to feed their children while innocent Black men provide cheap prison labor for deranged corporations based on bogus cannabis charges. What kind of trustworthy universe allows this to happen? I don't mean to be rude, but either you're not as intelligent as you claim, or you're spending too much time on vacation. Waits for an explanation, waits longer. The sound of silence remains. Sigh. It's no wonder people fight. Abandonment trauma from source causes the deepest trust issues. All we want is to feel safe. Turns attention within. Then again, universe, maybe I don't need to trust you. Maybe you're just a test, the trickster archetype, a cosmic game for souls to play, and your challenges are designed to make me stronger. Maybe seeking assurance in you is just reliance on yet another external source for my own salvation, a distraction from my own inner light, a light which contains a microcosm reflection of all light in the living cosmos. Maybe I only need to trust myself.
So good and so relatable. Like the times that, we want to take that leap into the unknown and like know for sure that we'll make it, like fear doesn't exist, but there's just that humanness in us that's like, well, I actually don't know. And what is your advice for like people who feel that way? They feel that there is maybe greater guidance out there, but at the same time they're recognizing that that universe they're seeking for is them. Like how do we come to place with like the external versus the internal trust?
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's an important balance because it's easy for people like you and me to be like, trust the universe, because that feels good. And I love posting things on social media because I can get feedback and see where other people are coming from. And it kind of comes back to this idea of spiritual bypassing, which is a big topic unto itself. But the debate is whether or not, you know, trusting the universe and just believing that everything's going to work out to your advantage. Well, is that a form of spiritual bypassing? Because what about all the people in the world who are suffering and life is not working out to their advantage? So if you're saying that, you're disregarding the experiences of less privileged people. So I think it's a very important balance, right? um and I think ultimately, um it, it's we cannot affect the external world through force. I think you can only affect the external world by going within yourself and changing yourself. I think that to a degree, the universe is a mirror. And to a degree, again, because I said all things are metaphors, so not every statement is true at all times for all people. But I think it's true that maybe we don't affect reality as a whole. Like we can't change the video game, right? But we can change our experience of the video game. We can change things internally that will change our experience of reality. So, I think it's okay to say I trust the universe, but I wanted to just kind of give in that poem, show another side of that. And it's like, yeah, we can trust the universe, but also in a way we can't, because things do go wrong for many people. So that's not always fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
But even if that is true, we still can trust ourselves, and we can trust ourselves to navigate the universe and to navigate the pitfalls of reality, because we do have um, a fractal microcosm of the light of the universe inside us, right? We are all, microcosm expressions of source, I believe. And when we recognize that within us and we engage with the universe from that place of inner presence, then we're more equipped to affect change in the outside world.
There's this story that I heard that there is this man, this very religious man, and his house was burning down. So he like goes to the top of the roof and like his house is like burning and it's like coming up and he's like, God, please save me. God, please get me out of here. And up the ladder comes this man. He's like, take my hand. I'll get you. He's like, no, I'm waiting for God. Like, I'm waiting for God. And then these firefighters come with their like big truck and they're like, hop on, like we can get you. He's like, no, I'm waiting for God. He's like, God, where are you? God, I have my full trust in you. God, I'm waiting for you. And then over his head comes a helicopter and they're like, grab this rope, we'll protect you. He's like, no, I put my full trust in God. And then he burned and died. And he went to the afterlife and he's like, God, where were you? I put my full faith in you. I trusted you and you didn't show up for me. And God's like, what are you talking about? I showed up for you in that man. I showed up for you in those firefighters. And I showed up for you in that helicopter, but you wouldn't take my support. And I love this story so much because it's like God is in everything. And also, we are the gods that we have been waiting for. So sometimes it's like, and I'll even be this way. I'm like, God, why is there so much pain and suffering? Like, can't you do something about it? And it's like, no, turn that finger around of me. Like, what can I do about this?
Yeah. And you know what? I love that so much. And I'll say as well, to tie this back, God is in technology.
Oh,
Because everyone wants to evolve and everyone wants to expand and everyone wants to ascend to 5D, right? But then when we see a virtual reality that's growing in artificial intelligence, we're afraid of that. Well, what if these are all tools to help accelerate our own evolution? What if technology and 5G technology, I love
damn,
the
you're
like
getting
five, like
controversial on this one.
I think so. It's like, well, we
5G, the
want
path to
five, we
5D.
want five, we want exactly, we want 5D, but we're afraid of 5G. And I'm just saying, what if these things are in some ways connected, right? What if technology is part of our evolution, right? And it kind of reminds me of I've gotten arguments with friends over this where, you know, I've had I think that technology is going. It's good. It's already enabling telepathy. Let's say, like I can post something on Instagram that will instantly be I'm seen by thousands of people, and I'm telepathically communicating with them through the power of technology. And I've had friends that say, well, but that technology is a crutch. You know, if we didn't have that technology, we would eventually learn how to communicate telepathically without it, just with our own human mind. And it's like, maybe, but like, how long does that skill take to develop? Technology is right there. So like another metaphor, like another parable, like the one you just said, I love one. There's a man sitting by the river, and he's been sitting there for the past 10 years, and he's meditating. And the Buddha walks by him, and the Buddha says, "Why are you sitting by this river? You've been meditating here for 10 years." And he says, "Yes, I'm trying to learn how to levitate so I can cross the river." And the Buddha says, "Yeah, but the ferry costs a nickel. Like you can just use the ferry to go across the river. It's right there, and it's going to enable you to get across." So I think
Yeah.
that technology is that's part of God's plan as well, and it's part of the gift that we're being given to evolve into you know uh, a more ethereal type of world.
Yeah, and I love that perspective because it's really one that we don't hear so much. And it's, you know, we can create a case for anything. And like I can create right now a case. I met my husband through an app. If I didn't have the dating app called Bumble, I don't know if I would have ever met him. So I would say technology majorly helped me out there. Or, you know, a friend of mine had a cyst in her ovary and she was like living in the jungles of Costa Rica for 2 years before. Luckily had just moved to Miami and was able to get an emergency surgery to get it removed. But if she was in that jungle, I don't know what would have happened. Not as good of a circumstance. So sometimes we like forget, again, we like take it so for granted. Like I remember as a kid, like having to like run so many errands with my parents. Okay, now we're going to Home Depot. Now we're doing this. Like people don't have to do that anymore because they can order it online and like they get their time back and it's shipped to them. And again, what are you going to do with that extra time now? Like, are you going to, and I just interviewed Sadhguru and we were talking about this and he's like, we have so much more time, but what a lot of people are doing is they're numbing themselves out, you know, for whatever, drinking, drugs, even social media. They're bringing in the energy of numbingness. Whereas we could take that extra time that we've been gifted because of technology and use it towards expanding our consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I met my fiance on Tinder as well. So these dating apps can, I think God can work through any tool. God can work through the internet. God can work through social media. I've had people reach out to me that found me on some like random Google search, right? So there are I think that when you're aligned and when you're on the right path, I think that the same way that the world can be a mirror, that includes technology. And we can this can be part of our own growth, and we can find synchronicities through the internet as much as we can through any other medium.
And it really just comes down to you, like how you use it and the level of consciousness that you're operating from. And then whether it's on social media or in real life, that's what you're going to attract. That's what the realm you're going to be playing in. So it's up to us to make those choices that serve us and serve the planet. So all of this is so good, so beautiful. And I want to leave it with one beautiful last quote that you said in the book. I like your happiness. Can you share that with us?
Yes. Then 1 second. It says, I like your happiness, I said. Where did you get it? This old thing, she answered. I made it myself.
So beautiful and so true. It's really up to us, our own creations, happiness online, offline, in any realm. We get the choice. So thank you so much for sharing with us all of this beautiful wisdom. I loved this conversation. And where can listeners get your new book?
Yeah, absolutely. So my new book, How to Laugh in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis, is available now. You can order it through, just check out the link in my bio on Instagram. And my Instagram handle is @WordsAreVibrations. And this is the first ever book of published memes. It's a collection of poetry and memes. And it's the first time that a collection of memes has actually been published in a book.
Wow, you truly are a meme artist. Well, thank you so much for expanding our worldview to a perspective that we don't get to hear so often, and for bringing all of this wisdom into such a palatable way where we really can laugh at our existential crisis and find the amusement of it all. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a treat.
Yay.